Good morning, Grace in the Desert and Epiphany Episcopal Church. It's good to be back. I am Dr. Joe Rhodes, and I'm a nominee for postulancy in the Episcopal Diocese of Nevada. I've been on a leave from my Tuesday tune-up duties for a bit, but I'm glad to have them back. It's exciting to see all the topics that everyone has going. And so I was sort of limited on topics. I didn't know really what you'd be interested in. And I thought to myself, what could I do that might appeal to you? And so today I wanted to talk about the 5 books that were sort of most important to me in shaping my own journey to where I'm at today. And as I started thinking about those, I felt like there were really a few different ways one could categorize it. And so what I ended up doing was getting 2 Tuesday tune-ups for one. And so today you're going to get the 5 theological books, the books that fed my intellectual life with Christ, and fed my rational brain, and fed my logocentric personality. And then in the next Tuesday tune-up, I'll talk about the 5 books that most influenced my spiritual journey. And it's not to say that both of those things don't merge a lot, but really it's just an excuse for me to talk about a lot of books that I love instead of only a few. So let's begin. So we can think about these maybe in terms of reverse order of importance. We're going to go 5 to 1. And so number 5 for me is this book here. It's called The Politics of Jesus, and it's by John Howard Yoder. John Howard Yoder was a Quaker theologian, and his question in this text was, what are Jesus's politics? If Jesus has a politics, what is it? What is the way of Jesus command of us in terms of politics? And it's daring to even discuss it today. In modern society, it sometimes feels like an off-limits subject, but it's what I spent my whole life studying. And so I'm very passionate about it. And it's not to say I'm passionate about one way of doing it, but some texts influence me more than others, and this is one of them. And so I thought I would read you first a reference on the back, sort of what the say is, and then I'll read you a little excerpt from the book. Dennis P. McCann, Agnes Scott College, said, "When it was first published, The Politics of Jesus affected a coup de grace. Neo-Orthodox biblical theologies that had managed, The Politics of Jesus affected a coup de grace against Neo-Orthodox biblical theologies that had managed to depoliticize the ethical significance of Jesus' message. This second edition is no less provocative in contesting the reevaluations of New Testament ethics emerging from recent scholarship on the historical Jesus. Yoder presses beyond the question of whether Jesus was political to ask what sort of politics is the mark of Christian discipleship." One of my favorite authors of all time is Albert Camus, and he was a French existentialist thinker in the 40s and 50s who died tragically in a car accident. He's very influential to me, and there's a great Christian Century article. I think it was in the Christian Century. I'll have to check. It may have been in the other popular Christianity Today. I'll have to check. But it was on Camus as sort of the most Christian atheist thinker. And he wrote a book called The Plague, and it's about a plague. And it takes place in 1947 is when the book takes place. And I read it twice in graduate school. I read it again during the pandemic. And it's just a really, really thoughtful, beautiful story about a community during a pandemic. And it's really good. Here's a little bit of it just for you. "All I maintain is that on this earth there are pestilences and there are victims. And it's up to us, so far as possible, not to join forces with the pestilences. That may sound simple to the point of childishness. I can't judge if it's simple, but I know it's true." Really just beautiful writing, and he really addresses some of the more deeper, darker questions about how we all behave in moments like the pandemic, and what separates Christians from the rest of us. He addresses that. He really, like Dostoevsky, sort of Christianity is always in the forefront of his atheism. So really good. That's number 4. Number 3, I don't have with me because I don't need it anymore. It's in a box. But number 3 is The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins. It really changed my faith from sort of a naive faith to a more realistic faith. I went through a period of dark agnosticism and atheism. It wasn't dark for me, it was enlightening, and I experienced it with joy. I didn't experience it as a sad thing. It was an enlightening period for me. And I think that for me personally, I had to go through that dark journey to sort of really come to a more mature faith and a more serious faith that doesn't need some of the traditional mythic sort of structures that the church and that the community have designed around the faith to still hold it fast and to love it and to follow Christ. So if you're one of those, and I was just someone at Theology on Tap the other night. It's a friend of mine who went to Princeton Theological Seminary, and he was saying that he taught a class on the God Delusion at the seminary. And I think it's really important for all of us to be defenders of our faith and not be afraid to stare into the abyss of doubt. It's one of the reasons I'm an Episcopalian, is that is encouraged and a positive, seen as a positive in the Christian community. So the God Delusion is number 3. Number 2, and I'm kind of cheating because it's 2 books, but one of them is by an Episcopalian who you're probably familiar with, which is Bishop Selby Spong. I grew up in an evangelical home where literalism was used in my church and my community to read the Bible through a lens that could be harmful. It was very selective in what was chosen to be literal and what wasn't. And Bishop Spong really helped me understand how to read specifically the Gospel of Matthew through the lens of the Jewish audience that would have heard it. It's not without its flaws, but it's a really good book. And on that vein, here's one you may not be familiar with, which is Kenneth Bailey, Jesus Through Middle Eastern Eyes. This book was just so cool. The first time I went through it, a friend of mine, professor at UNC, Chris Lundberg, is a pastor. He recommended this to me, and I can't get enough of it. He really goes through and helps us understand he's sort of what a Palestinian audience at the time would have understood when they were reading certain Jesus stories. And he goes all the way through the gospel, starting right from our sort of mythic understanding of Jesus in a manger, Jesus turned away and having to sleep in a stable, and he just talks about like how that would never have happened in society at that time. And then also doesn't just deconstruct some of the mythic notions we have, but shows how a more contextual-based reading can be a more enlightening and loving way to read the gospel. So, highly recommended. Last but not least, Reinhold Niebuhr, Moral Man and Immoral Society. This one, I was a graduate student who was studying religion and more importantly studying atheism as a sort of way of being in the world, more than just a belief system, but just like what it means to have an atheist perspective. And I encountered this book. It was on my shelf. My dad had given me some books before I went to graduate school, and it still says, you won't be able to see it, I don't think, but it says Bobby Rhodes, September 1974. And so this book came from my dad's seminary, and he never recommended it, he never talked about it, he never mentioned it. His highlighter marks are very few, so I don't think it was that important to him, but he gave it to me, and it absolutely saved my life and brought me back to my faith in a really cool way. And in the book, he addresses sort of why we find it easy to do the right thing, not easy always, but much easier to do the right thing as people, as individuals acting in the world, versus why we find such a hard time to do the right thing once we get into collective groups. And this book was groundbreaking when it was written in the late 20s, and he became very influential after writing it because it really shaped a lot. Martin Luther King attributed this book to a lot of his work on nonviolence and his ideas of justice and love as sort of ideals and in social movements. This book was very influential in Barack Obama's presidency. If you want to hear what this book sounds like in a speech, go listen to Barack Obama's Nobel lecture when he received the Nobel Peace Prize early on. Just a really cool book. I'm really glad that my dad gave it to me, and it's my number 1 for sure. He's not right about everything, but my phone went dead mid-recording, so apologies for the cut there. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. That's 5 of the books that have influenced my intellectual journey more than any others. And next time I join you, I'll share with you 5 texts that really influenced my spiritual journey and my walk with God today. And so I look forward to sharing that with you. I hope you all have a blessed week, and go in peace.